Hello again.
Hello.
Melissa Wilson there, Jonathan Overend here.
Heading to Portsmouth?
Time
Plymouth.
Plymouth.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Re-record that one. Next time I'll say pool.
People like that sort of thing. That'll be the top
Oh
before
no,
the theme
don't.
tune.
Hannah will hate me.
So hello again, Emergency on Planet Sport. I'm Jonathan Overend.
I'm Melissa Wilson, heading to Plymouth.
We're heading out onto the water for this, so Melissa should feel nice and comfortable as a former rower. We're off to meet our friends at Sail GP. This episode is all about the impact of an impact league. Now, we're going to tell you about the Impact League in a bit, but I really quite like this concept, Melissa, that sport doesn't just have to be the winning and losing in a traditional sense. Can we shift the parameters of sport so that actually winning means a lot more than just scoring more goals or crossing the line first?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting example of how do you bring sustainability in a really integral way into what you're trying to do, so that it's not in someone's in tray and being watered down and delayed. It's actually absolutely part of the sport itself, which makes so much sense given what we've said earlier about how reliant most sports are on the natural environment. So it feels in some ways like we're just bringing forward what we recognise is going to be increasingly a problem in the future about we rely on nature. The more compromised nature becomes as a result of the climate crisis, the more compromised sport becomes. So rather than having this isolated winning and losing just in a sporting context, we're drawing that horizon forward and saying actually we win and lose now, both in a sporting context and an environmental context too.
All right, let's talk more about that in a bit. Before that, let's go and meet them. Sail GP took the train down to Plymouth.
We are now approaching Plymouth, where this train terminates.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
That's nice, the seagulls.
Oh, here we go.
This is what we want. So this episode is coming to you from the southwest of England, specifically the city of Plymouth, which, if I'm not mistaken, is officially Britain's ocean city. And this particular weekend, it's hosting the British leg of Sail GP, and Fiona Morgan is alongside me, not just because she is the Director of Impact and Purpose at Sail GP, but also because she is the #1 fan of Emergency on Planet Sport. How are you? It's very nice to see you.
I'm good, and of course I'm a super fan. Love what you do.
Do you have the T-shirt yet, though?
No, but I'm sure you'll send me one after when I do such a good job today.
We've done a limited edition run of one.
Oh, wow.
Which obviously is in XXL for me, just for publicity purposes. But, you know, if this series kicks off, we might progress to 10. Anyway, it's lovely to see you. And we're standing here overlooking, now what do you call this? Plymouth Sound.
Plymouth Sound, yeah.
Sounds like a radio station, but actually
know.
it is your course.
It's an amphitheatre. Look at it, it's beautiful. And like you said, this is Britain's ocean city and also the UK's first ever national marine park. So a great place for us to race.
So we're looking out at the moment at some of these amazing super yachts. They're catamaran, aren't they? Just before we go any further, just brief us on what Sail GP is all about.
So Sail GP in a nutshell is really the most exciting racing on water. So we're foiling Global League, and we really are the most sustainable, or want to be the most sustainable sport in the world. It's nation versus nation, and the F50s are powered by nature. So these amazing, beautiful boats are powered by the wind and the sun, which, can you believe that? And they go at magnificent speeds.
So powered by the wind, I get that.
Yeah.
Powered by the sun as well. Tell us more.
Yeah, so we have batteries on board for the electricals, and they're powered by our clean energy solutions on site. So you'll probably see when you've been walking around, we have big solar arrays, either in our fan village or tech site. So what we do is bring the batteries back, put them in the tech base, in the team tents, and then they're powered by solar.
So what I love about Sail GP is we come down here to watch sport, but that's kind of not essentially why you're in existence, right? Yes, you do sport, but your purpose is far wider and far greater than that.
It definitely is, but we still are a sport. I think the brilliant thing is we've got this most amazing product plus sustainability at the heart. You know, you don't have to have one or the other, because I think some sports maybe, you know, do one better than the other, but we really are that kind of, you know, interconnection of the best racing on water. We really are. These boats they're all identical. So the athletes, you know, Sir Ben Ainslie, Tom Slingsby, they say that this is the most even playing field and they're so competitive out there. But then, like you said, sustainability is in the DNA. We're doing things differently. And being quite a young sport, I think what you can do is actually do that from day one.
And what does that actually mean? In practice, it's at your heart, but what does that mean?
So what it means is it's the way you operate. So we have 3 pillars to the business. So you obviously have entertainment. We want to make this exciting. We don't call it sailing, we call it racing. We also want to get technology and innovation at the heart. We have a founder, obviously, who is from a big tech background. And then sustainability is obviously a pillar in there. So you integrate it in everything you do. And I think that's the biggest learning I always give to other sports is it's not an add-on, a comms vehicle, a silo. It's embedding it. Something sport can do is we can kind of communicate sustainability in a different way. In fun, engaging ways, different words, where actually what it's selling is sell the vision, sell the greatness we want. Don't talk about the difficult scientific acronyms. So I feel passionate about that, and you'll see in SailGP, hopefully, in the way we communicate.
And also taking that a stage further in terms of the athletes, you want the athletes to look at everything they do, and you want them to be here for that very reason, don't you? You don't want them to just, we're doing a bit on sustainability today. Could you say a few words about your recycling or something like that? This is far greater than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're super ambitious here at SailGP, if you can notice from being down here. So I think, the athletes are a big part of that. So what we did is actually in Plymouth last July, we launched the first ever impact league in sport. So first ever league where you actually rate your athletes for being sustainable, social and environmental. So that's using behaviour change and kind of redefining performance in sport. Because imagine the Olympics or other sports caring about what their athletes ate, how they travelled there, what they do over and above being good at their sport.
So how's
but
all that
why shouldn't they?
Yeah, so how's all that data collected then? I mean, are they just filling out a survey at the end of each day?
Yeah, so imagine how competitive these athletes are. So it's a very robust system, and we have an external auditor that spends 6 to 8 days auditing data. So yeah, they have to give us, evidence. It's like a normal audit. They give us evidence of everything, like how did you travel to the event? What did you eat? How are you using your voice for good? So how are you collaborating? So, what's your fuel use in your chase boat on the water? So a lot we get data sources, but others they have to give us. Then we audit it, and then we score it. But the best thing about it is they're so competitive that they actually kind of protest and contest each other's scores.
Really?
Because they want to win. The day of the results, honestly, my phone, I get voice notes, I get pictures, and it's all about, someone left their lights on, they can't be the winner, or I saw someone eating a burger. But how amazing is athletes calling me and caring about that and thinking it? And that's what we need, is this different mindset. No one's perfect, but it's thinking differently.
So you have like a proper podium and ceremony,
Of course
do you,
we
for
have
the
a
winner of the
podium,
Impact
yeah,
League?
and there's
Wow.
money involved. I think when you do
Hello.
things like this, like I said, you've got to embed it and live it and breathe it. So it's a second podium, second trophy, made of carbon recycled from our F50, and there's money involved. Last year was $150,000. This year, it's over nearly $500,000 US is going to be up for grabs. And it's not the teams that win the money. Who do you think win the money? Who do you think wins the money?
Presumably, it's the good causes that they're supporting.
Yeah. So not many leagues in the world. Every single team has a purpose. So that was one of my first jobs here, and amazing, sitting with the athletes, the team CEOs, the partners, and saying, what's your purpose beyond winning? And so we defined that. We set goals about what they want to achieve over the next 5 years. And then we found them a kind of purpose partner. It's like an NGO, but we don't pay the NGOs like a normal relationship. Again, they need to get in bed with SailGP and help us operate differently. So they win the money in the Impact League. So say Denmark, who are incredible, who won the last Impact League, their purpose partner, One Ocean, is going to win the money. And then we look at how do we spend that money in great causes for ocean blue carbon regeneration or clean energy, or, and it's not all environmental NGOs. Some are, looking at accessibility in sailing, or they're looking at getting more, obviously, gender equity into the sport. So it's about, everything we need to do to make the sport better.
Could any sport have an Impact League?
Of course they could. And one of my KPIs this year is to get a sport to take on this concept. And so I'll be working with the UN Sport for Climate Action framework to present at the end of the summer kind of what we've learned and like a blueprint and say, come on, let's go. I mean, I've had interest. I was talking up at the Commonwealth Games this week, and I had young NGOs or young sports or school sports come up to me saying, we want to do this. But it does feel a bit scary. That's why I think we want to share the learnings, kind of help sports. So if a sport said to me, I want an Impact League, I would spend time with them to try and embed it in what they do.
Great. Well, we'll pass on Fiona's contact details for anyone who gets in touch and anyone who's interested. I suppose the natural progression from that, Fee, is to say, well, could you embed the Impact League in the overall standings of your competition? I.e., if you cut your carbon footprint, you've actually got a better chance of winning the whole damn thing.
No, that will happen.
Oh, okay.
So when we launched it,
that was very definite.
Yeah, it will happen. I think you got to be passionate and driven to do it. So when we launched it, you've got to operate it, and 2 podiums. We wanted to really make sure it works. But the idea always is to integrate it into one championship. Like you said, athletes, if they have a low carbon footprint, that incentivizes them on water, and the points are combined. So that's a long-term vision and goal for SailGP, but one that we believe in. But this season we've kind of, it's like marginal gains, but the winner of the Impact League gets like a golden ticket. So additional coaching or craning in. Obviously, when you get craned, you get more training time. So that's what we've done to integrate it into racing this season. But every season we'll do more. And like you said, the end will be one big season winner who's the most sustainable sport, team and best on water racing.
Okay, so we've moved away from the Harbourside and we're just walking down towards the technical area, which if I just crane my neck above the wall there, I can just see a couple of the boats. That is an extraordinary sight, actually. We can see one of the boats that's just come out of the water and they take the sail off.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
it takes a long time to crane them out of the water. That's what people don't understand. It can take up to an hour.
And that creates a bit of a queue. And did I hear that actually could be one of the little incentives to your Impact League? You kind of get to the front of the queue when it comes to using the crane.
Yeah, that is one incentive. So
I like that.
they can pick their training time, which gives them more training time on water. And obviously, given we're going around the world, there's limited time to train. And so it's really critical for teams to have that.
So more from Fiona Morgan in a bit, but Melissa, first of all, let's talk about this idea of the Impact League. I think it's really interesting. And I know for a fact that there are some sports who've looked at this and said, we can use this in our sport. Because this idea that if you finish top of the sustainability table in terms of what you're doing, preparing for a race weekend in this instance, and then across the race weekend, can actually help you in terms of what we traditionally know as the way sport is conducted, then we're in.
Yeah.
And I'm in because I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's super transferable, isn't it? Because there's nothing unique about the SailGP athletes being sailors that would mean that it can't be replicated in really any other sport. I can't think of a sport that couldn't say, right, we're going to do the same thing here. And I loved what Fiona said about what we really want to do here is sell the vision. And that feels like exactly what having an Impact League really integrated into your sport does. It says, right, this is how we need to be acting. It now really matters to us because we have the immediate consequences of winning or losing in a sporting context wrapped in with what we're doing in an environmental sense too.
And just to be clear, of one of the things that they did over that weekend in Plymouth, and when you see it in operation, you understand how tricky it is. These cranes literally lift these catamaran in and out of the water every time they want to go racing, and also every time they go practicing. Yeah. So it's not like you rowers, put your boat over your shoulder, walk down the ramp and in you go. This can take up to an hour, getting these extraordinary craft in and out of the water. So they're saying, win the Impact League, you get first dibs on the crane.
Yeah.
And what does that mean in practice? It means you're in the water.
Yes.
And at least an hour before your rivals.
Yes.
To potentially give you a competitive edge.
I think you then were asking around, what would that look like in tennis? Would it be players receiving wild cards? Would it be the equivalent of winning the toss? I think we could really go in a lot of exciting directions looking at what would be the quick win for doing the thing that we need to have the longer term environmental win. It just all feels like a very good idea, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then the extension is exactly that question that I put to Fiona. When are we going to actually say, well, if you're the most sustainable team or individual, then actually it has a direct benefit for you in terms of your competition. And she says that will happen.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking about the reality of that, of being an athlete, choosing to live in a more sustainable way, whether it's eating plant-based, recycling more, walking rather than taking the car. It's hard to tie that to an immediate sense of, other than I think I did the right thing, there's not that kind of concrete sense of, right, this is going to aid an additional outcome that I really, really want. When you're an athlete and you're in the gym, you're churning out the miles, you're putting yourself through physical pain hour after hour, I can just imagine if somebody walked in and said, oh, by the way, those last few kilometres were pretty redundant because you and your team haven't been doing your recycling, or you all decided to sit in your cars individually on the way. I mean, you'd be infuriated. So I think part of what we're doing here is talking about the ways in which sport has this unique opportunity to move on this, and the ferocious nature of people's desire to win here, I think, is something that we should absolutely be tapping into. And that's one of the things that I think impact leagues can absolutely be doing.
Yes. So I love that idea of really brainstorming how other sports could potentially use an impact league and the benefits that you could provide athletes and teams if they come top of that league. So do get in touch with your suggestions. planetsportpod@gmail.com or planetsportpod on social media. Right, let's head back to Plymouth and meet somebody who is ultra competitive. She has to be, because she's right at the top of one of the big teams, which is the Canadian Sail GP team. But she's one of these extraordinary people who isn't just good at one sport, is good at two as well, because Isabella Bertold is an international cyclist as well as an international sailor. So let's go and meet Isabella. She's great.
Isabella Bertold, and I have a dual role with Canada Sail GP. I'm a strategist, and I also lead the impact and purpose for the team.
Okay, so we've been hearing from Fiona Morgan about the Impact League, which clearly is a big thing. She was saying it's very competitive.
It's very competitive.
and you guys really want to win it.
We do. It is part of our mission at the start of the season to win the Impact League, and I don't think I appreciated quite how competitive it was going to be. And I know we've become much more strategic as how we're approaching this event specifically after Chicago to try and move back up to the top of the leaderboard.
Okay, so we'll get into that in just a moment. It's worth pointing out that all the data is freely available, isn't it? So you can effectively spy on the other teams to see what they're doing.
Yeah, you can. But I think what I like about that is it's also inspirational. So you kind of can see what other teams are working on and get some ideas from them and see how it fits into what you're working on and maybe why things are different or where there's overlap and how you can collaborate with them as well.
So what are you most proud of in Team Canada?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think we're very focused, even though it's not heavy on the point side yet, on the innovation side of things. Our purpose partner, OceanWise, is very science focused. And so we have a few things around plastics that we're working on. One of them is actually analyzing the type of plastic that is in the water that we're racing in. And then the other one is focused around how much plastic sheds off of our gear when you put it in a washing machine. So we've got two fun projects there. And then a third one that I'm really hoping works is we're trying to teach a mushroom to eat the Clysar from our boat. So that's...
wow. Okay,
yeah.
That's going to take a little bit of explanation. So say that again.
Yeah. So our team did a circular economy workshop in Chicago. And I'm quite familiar with it just from my background in professional cycling and working with brands on it there. But I wanted to introduce it to my teammates and to other teams as well within the league. And so we started off with this very basic concept of what the circular economy is, and then actually learned about what's happening in nature and how nature has started to adapt to our habits. And we learned through the group, they're called Plant Chicago, that there's actually mushrooms that eat plastic. And they've adapted themselves to eat this plastic and to process it. And so one thing we're working on with them now is seeing if the mushroom will actually eat the Clysar that comes off of our boats, so that we don't have to throw the Clysar away anymore. Instead, this mushroom hopefully will eat it and process it for us.
And where is said mushroom? I mean,
the mushroom is in Chicago.
Okay. Just one mushroom or a team of mushrooms?
There's multiple mushrooms.
Okay.
And actually, I learned earlier today that there's a similar project happening just at the university here in Plymouth.
Okay.
As well, and they were quite familiar with it. So I think these mushrooms are all over, and
well, there we go. And if you
yeah.
need a team mascot, we know what it's going to be. If we spot a giant mushroom walking around, that's Team Canada. Okay, you mentioned cycling, big part of your life for a long time, right?
Yeah, I'm actually a professional cyclist, so I am competing in both of these sports at a professional level, side by side. And what's super unique about our pro cycling team is that we have a sustainability mission as well. So we are carbon neutral, and then we work with all of our suppliers to help them become more sustainable and integrate more sustainability things on their side. So again, very focused on the innovation side of things, and very familiar with the UN Sports for Climate Action as well. We're a signatory there and actively involved in a few different working groups through them.
But that's really interesting having those combined interests, because here you're involved in a series whose purpose is climate action, but then you've also got your team and your other sport,
Yep.
which is just kind of just a sport and just gets on with life, but needs to also grow in this space, right? So
yeah, and I think there's a lot of similarities around them and a lot of similar challenges, just people movement, shipping as well. And I mean, I think professional cycling has miles to go. I mean, if you watched the Tour de France a few weeks ago, you saw maybe 100 cyclists riding and at least 300 cars doing the trip behind them at the same time. So that sport...
And not many electric cars.
No, none.
Right, there we go.
So I mean, miles to go there, and but yeah, a lot of similarities on like working with carbon and trying to make that side of the sport a little bit cleaner as well.
But that's what's interesting about, visiting SailGP here, and also Formula E as well, series which are designed with the climate in mind. There's no reason why other sports can't adapt in the same way, right?
Correct.
That shouldn't take decades to happen. I mean, that could happen in the next couple of years, right?
I'd hope so. I don't think it's going to.
No, do you think sport's too clunky? Yeah.
I think especially... I mean, I love what SailGP's coming in, because they've basically shown that a sport can change quickly, and the sport of sailing is better for what SailGP has done on many levels. And I think that a traditional sport like cycling can learn from that, and rather than having people say it's always been like this, it needs to be like this, looking at it and going, well, why not just completely turn the model upside down and start all over?
Well, we made the point in the first series, which we made during the COVID pandemic, that the whole world adapted just like that when COVID hit, right?
Yeah.
So
correct.
Why can't we adapt because of the climate crisis?
Yeah, I will say cycling managed throughout COVID to continue traveling just like everything was normal. So
okay, that's very interesting.
Nice and
are they listening to you?
I think we're making progress. We're in a working group now that's being led by the UCI and the UN Sports for Climate Action. There's just a lot of stakeholders, but I think I am optimistic. It might not be 2 years, but 5 years, I think the sport will look quite different.
Okay. And talking of cycling, you're actually combining the two, aren't you? You're cycling to a SailGP event. Tell us about that.
I am, yeah.
And this isn't just round the corner, we should point out.
Yeah, well, I looked at the SailGP calendar and thought, well, St Tropez and Cadiz aren't that far apart. Why not ride my bike from point A to point B? And along the way, I really want to highlight, I mean, the route basically goes along a coast the whole way. So just how we interact with our coastline and the importance of, basically, I'm going to say saving our oceans, because there's more plastic than fish in the ocean right now, and that's not sustainable long time. And also a good chance to highlight some sustainable transport. And yeah, show off the route along the way.
But this is France to Spain, yeah?
It is, yeah. St Tropez to Cadiz.
How many miles?
It's about 1,200 kilometers.
Okay, that's a long way.
It's going to
be a good ride.
It's a solid challenge. And actually, while I race professionally, most of women's races are only about 130 kilometers long. So the longest ride I've ever done in my life is 170 kilometers. And the longest day that I'm going to have to get from St Tropez to Cadiz is 324 kilometers. So it's going to be quite a personal challenge as well.
Do the math.
Yeah.
So almost twice as far as you've ever ridden before in one go, and then repeat.
And by myself, so no wheels to draft.
Oh boy. and then compete in an elite level global sporting series once you get there.
Correct. Yeah.
After a quick lie down, I hope.
I think I'm going to sleep for the 2 days straight before racing starts.
Really interesting. Thank you, Isabella. We could talk for hours. Maybe we should hook up on Zoom and have a longer chat later in the series.
That'd be great.
That would be fun.
That'd be
Good
great.
luck for your ride. Good luck for this weekend as well here in Plymouth. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's Isabella Bertold. Melissa, hats off to her for that cycle challenge, by the way. That is a long way. Yeah. And she's got to compete at the end of that ride.
I know, it's leaving me with visions of, I don't know actually where we're going next with this podcast, but whether we ought to be cycling there on some sort of tandem.
Oh, okay. What, for our next scheduled interview or something?
Exactly.
Okay, I quite like that.
So impressive what Isabella's doing. Really, really amazing.
What about the mushrooms eating the plastic? I'd never heard of that before.
I know. You
Mildly
do.
disgusting.
Yeah, sometimes I feel a bit hopeless about the direction of travel in terms of climate, and then you find out about things like that and you think, right, okay, there are solutions. We just need to keep finding them, and we need more people to be engaging with them, because who would have thought? I never knew that. I'm amazed by it, and what a win for that particular sporting challenge.
At this point, I'd like to get stuck into something that Isabella talked about there, regarding her other sport and the fact that at the Tour de France you might have 300 cars following all these cyclists around beautiful France. And this is definitely an issue, I think, in sport, that sometimes our eye gets taken off the ball in terms of the bigger picture. It's misleading sometimes when we hear all these brilliant stories of what sport is doing. Sometimes we look up in the sky and there's still a helicopter filming it for TV. And in this example at Sail GP, out on the water, you've got invariably diesel-driven boats which are ferrying out the photographers and the media and the medical staff and the race officials and all that sort of thing. Well, it's something that Sail GP definitely want to get on top of, so much so that they hired Tom Verity from Extreme E to look into this very issue of, how shall we describe it, the surround sound of sport.
So Tom Verity joined my team to lead our on-water transition. So on-water is our biggest carbon footprint that we control. And people can't believe that because our F-50s are powered by nature. But obviously you've got media boats, you've got hospitality boats, you've got, health and safety boats, which obviously follow each team in case there's an incident.
And they're not sailing boats.
And they're not sailing boats. They're petrol engine boats. And the helicopter, we have a broadcast helicopter. How do we get that out of the sky? Look, more drone technology, because all of these have a carbon footprint impact.
Here he is.
Oh, Tom's
Here's
here
Tom.
again. We've just been talking Tom's praises.
Fiona's been singing Tom's praises. It's nice to meet you, Tom. Having a good weekend so far?
Fantastic weekend. There's never a bad day at Sail GP. What you can see here in front of you is some of our mooring tenders. So when we're talking about transitioning the support fleet, obviously there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there for us. We have anything from these small little ribs that tool around all day and help the teams manoeuvre around the moorings, right up to our team chase boats, which are actually parked beside the Canadian yacht there, just keeping it in place.
So these are the support vessels, basically.
Exactly that, and you can see the mooring tender there has got a little electric engine on the back of it there. So we've already transitioned those to completely electric, but we're completely technology agnostic. So electric will play a role in certain situations, and electric has a sweet spot as well as you start to look at the weight distribution of the batteries on board boats. So if you're starting to go up the sliding scale of performance and you need really high speeds and high range, the weight of the batteries increases exponentially, and obviously trying to fit them on a craft that's trying to float and manoeuvre around the water becomes a challenge in itself. So electric will service the range of our performance requirements, but we'll also see other technologies coming through, like hydrogen technologies, maybe electric powertrains with hydrogen range extenders on there. We're looking into alternate fuels. If you look at a lot of the sport boats that we use, these are similar duty cycles, similar use profiles to a lot of different bodies out there, such as the RNLI, or we look at the Olympics, or we look at some of the world sailing events out there. They're using very similar craft and very similar fleet to service their events. So if we can help develop solutions, whether that's a consortium approach or our own solutions with the vendors that we're working with that are transferable into those worlds, then Sail GP can have a much wider impact across the marine industry.
But this is all part of a wider debate, I suppose, in terms of the transition of the marine industry as a whole, not just Sail GP, because we talk about futuristic transportation, we inevitably think about cars because that's what we use most. In the marine industry, where would you say is the marine industry in terms of that transition compared to the motor vehicle industry?
So I think the marine industry is around 10 to 15 years behind where the terrestrial sector is. There's a lot of emerging solutions out there. Electric starting to come through, as you can see. We've got some electric solutions here today.
And why do you think that is? Why is it so far behind?
I think one of the key things is utilisation. So obviously ownership over boats compared to cars is not as high. There's not as big a legislative push as well. So from a governmental perspective, the legislation's not as aggressive to push innovation in this space. And typically, the maritime sector's typically been slow moving because it needs to be tried and tested technology or out at sea, right? If something goes wrong out at sea, it's a lot harder to get fixed, and I guess the stakes are higher if something does go wrong. I think we have to be transparent in the challenges that we're facing. I think what we're trying to do and what we do especially in my space, looking at technology development, is get our challenge areas out there and not shy away from that. So we've got collaborations with universities where we attend conferences and try and get the message of the challenge areas that we're trying to meet out to industry as well, to make sure that any technology development or any solutions that we develop within the championship are not developed in a silo, and they also have a technology transfer outside of the championship to the real world. So I think being open, honest about your challenge areas, working with vendors to meet those challenge areas, kind of turns the needle of innovation, which is needed in the marine sector, right? We need private enterprise to accelerate the needle of innovation. That allows that to happen.
Tom's amazing. We love Tom.
So let's wrap up, Fiona, back with Fiona Morgan here, with a few challenging questions, because I'm sure you challenge yourself in your job. Come on, you can't be doing everything right after just 3 years. So what can we challenge you to do for 2023? What would you like to do yourself that you're not doing at the moment?
I think what I like to do, and one of my focus areas, is global sport's biggest problem is travel, right? Not just about our travel, our staff, but also our fans. So what we're doing is trying to reduce that. So more remote working, really being mindful about people on site, and then educating our fans on sustainable tourism, sustainable travel. So that's sport's biggest problem. It's the biggest part of everyone's footprint. And instead of being scared and kind of hiding, I think you need to face it head on. But we don't have all the answers. Sustainable aviation's not there. But I think you need to think differently. And we're going to have to cut our workforce incredibly and have remote working, more local staff. We have to, because we've set a big target in reducing our footprint to 55%.
But it's true that a couple of members of the British team have cycled to Plymouth. I mean, that's dedication, right?
Definitely. And it's also not just about them saving their footprint. It's about how they've communicated, because it's been picked up and people are asking, why do you care about your footprint? Why would you travel sustainably to an event? So, it's also that using their voice and that kind of influence that sport has.
But also saying to that question, why not? Flipping the priority, isn't it? And one day, hopefully, we'll get to a stage where everyone, is at the forefront of everyone's mind, rather than just, I've just got to do that.
An afterthought or too difficult. I suppose that's what we want to do, is show. I think it can be fun and engaging, and you can find, it's a great communication tool. You get great partners who want to work with you on it. I think my advice when people ask me is look at it as an opportunity instead of a problem or something that's going to be costly or inefficient. It's an opportunity, and this is where the world's going. So I think, get on board. What a terrible pun. Get on board now.
Get on board, absolutely. Great, Fiona, thanks for having us. It was a really fun episode. Loved coming down, and wish you well for the rest of the series.
See you next year.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Melissa, this is really interesting, isn't it? On one hand, full marks to SailGP and Tom Verity there for holding their hands up to say, there are still challenges that we need to tackle. We can do better. We can all do better. And that's great to hear. But then this issue of the surround sound, the support craft in this instance, the fact that there are still plenty of emissions going on. Do we concentrate too much on the individual in this debate and maybe ignore the bigger picture?
Well, definitely. I think that the piece about the individuals and creating change amongst athletes and within what viewers and spectators and fans see on their screens is about then inspiring those other individuals, that kind of trickle-down effect. But I think we absolutely, in kind of concrete terms, need to be looking at the relative emissions generated from that kind of entourage piece. And with the cycling, I thought it was really interesting. Just a week ago, there was a journalist writing in Cycling Weekly saying, look, our sport absolutely has to wake up to the scale of this problem, and here are my 8 solutions for what we need to be doing. And he was talking about, we need no helicopters, we need drones, we need fewer races starting off in other countries to where the actual event is being held. We need solar panelled buses transferring all the athletes we need and the teams. His suggestion was we need to electrify all of the support vehicles. And that felt it's another example, like the Impact League that we're talking about, some really innovative, bold thinking that pushes us in the right direction.
Well, good luck to all the SailGP teams for the rest of the season. It is a global series. It's a very new series, so they're innovating and they're changing all the time. And that was really interesting, wasn't it? And we look forward to hearing all your suggestions of how impact leagues in different sports could benefit the athletes or the clubs. Get in touch at Planet Sport Pod on social media. planetsportpod@gmail.com is our email address, and we will be back very, very soon.
See you then.